Welcome to our fifth Rental Roundtable episode. We've got Doug Haas on today. Doug, welcome. Thank you for coming.
Hi, thank you.
Doug's been in the rental industry for 35 years, so about 12 times longer than I have. So there's a lot to learn here. Excited to have you on, Doug. We've known each other just for a couple months from a mutual connection, got to see each other at the ARA Missouri event last month. One question is to keep things light. Every time I talk to you, you have just gotten back from a motorcycle trip or about to go on another one. So I know you're at Sturgis this summer. What's the next big trip coming up for you?
Well, the next big trip is just northern Minnesota with a group of friends. We'll take a long weekend and ride around and have fun.
Keep it local. No cross-country trips right now.
Nothing this year.
Very good. Well, for the audience who's joined, this is very interactive. Typically what will happen is people can just chat in questions, and as you chat them in, I'll ask them to Doug. So this is really, I learn a lot from these events, but really for the audience too, to ask Doug questions directly. So that's the one housekeeping rule. We try to go up until 12. We'll stop right at an hour, and we can go a few different ways. So I guess, Doug, just to kick things off, tell me about how you got into equipment rental to begin with. 35 years later, you're still here. Love to hear people get into the industry for the first time.
You know, I was in the automotive repair business, and I like working on stuff, but customers weren't always happy to come in and see you because they were spending hundreds and thousands of dollars on their car, and so I got tired of that part of it, and saw a job opening for a equipment mechanic at a rental store, and it was a startup, and so I became their first employee and stayed here. And 25 years into it, the owner decided it was time to pass it on and started selling the business off to me.
So that entire journey, have you been at Crown Rental in Minnesota 35 years then?
Yep. I've been here the whole time. Started, like I say, as mechanic, wash bay, warehouse, janitor. I was the only employee, so did it all.
Are you still doing the janitor duties, or you pass that off?
I still, usually I delegate it, but I do.
Part of the owner.
Still get stuck with it every once in a
while. I'm sure there's probably no job you haven't done at this point in the business. How's, in your mind, I'm just curious, how's the industry changed in the last several decades? From when you started, you've seen it the whole way through. What's changed in your mind?
Well, the small hand tools have kind of gone away. You know, back 35 years ago, we rented circular saws and drills and things like that, and that's pretty much gone away. Everybody buys their own now. You know, it used to be on a Saturday morning, we'd have a line out the door. People want to get power rakes and aerators and work in the yards, and we don't see that anymore. It's usually they want to go golfing in the morning, and they show up in the afternoon to do their lawn work, keep their wife happy. But other than that, it's, you know, the equipment's gotten way more electronic from when I started. So you gotta know how to fire up a laptop and hook it up to a lot of equipment.
A lot different than it used to be. Well, later on, I'd love to talk about the contactless stuff. We have time that you've been working on, but I guess one of the main topics today we want to talk about was efficient fleet management and maximizing your return on investment using metrics, analytics. You know, there's like the back of your hand. Maybe just a broad question. How do you think about that? How do you think about using numbers, metrics to maximize your ROI on your equipment? What to buy, when to buy it, things like that?
Well, you know, we utilize missed rental. I found over the years that it's a lot easier to fill a need than it is to create a need. You know, I've been one of the guys that you see something really cool and think that'll make a great rental item, so I buy it, and nobody rents it. I was the first one to buy a rock vacuum, and I thought it was the slickest thing in the world. But it took 2 years of owning it before it became a popular item, just because nobody knew about it. So, you know, when you try new things like that, don't expect to get an ROI on it right away. If you got somebody calling you and asking you for something, buy it. If it's one guy, think about it. But if you're getting multiple 2-3 times a year, you're getting asked, buy it, because once it's on your website and people know you have it, because you're only getting a few people asking, there's more people out there that don't ask because they don't see it on your website. I had a customer call me just last year about a compost spreader that looked like a lawn roller, but it was wire mesh to spread compost. It was $100 on mine, so I bought one. I'm on my third one now, and they're 300% ROI. So I said, didn't think about it until somebody asked, and I thought, well, I'll give it a shot. So
yeah, that's interesting. I guess if you're getting a call about something that you're not selling on your website, that you're not advertising, that's usually a pretty good signal that there's demand. And you're saying that's usually the tip of the iceberg. If one person, 2 people start asking you for things that you're blatantly not marketing, that's usually a signal that something could be there. And your suggestion is to go ahead and make that purchase. Is that right?
Yeah, especially on, like I say, no-brainer stuff where it's $100. We all gamble with $100, but when it's 100,000, it's a little bigger decision. But yeah, like I say, if you're getting people asking, don't, have the conversation. I always told my employees that, we're partners with our contractors. They need to make money and we need to make money. So we can make their life easier, they're going to be happy with us. So and they'll rent more. You got to make it easy for them to do their job.
Yeah, and something we talked about in the last episode with John Adcock around, like, you can be wrong, but you got to minimize the cost of being wrong. Sounds like $100, you can be wrong. It's not going to take down your business. But what about the more expensive equipment? Does that change the bar for what the purchasing decision looks like? Maybe it's not 1 or 2 calls, but maybe there's, I don't know, 4 or 5. I'm curious how you think about, as you get into more expensive equipment, what sort of metrics analysis do you do before pulling the trigger on that?
A lot of it's gut, but like I say, if people are asking, I won't buy multiples of something. I'll buy one, bring it in and try it out. Now, having said that, light towers, when we got into that years ago, it was my daughter's first trade show at the ARA, and I told her, I says, well, you can buy one thing. And so she went out and she bought a light tower. And I says, why did you buy a light tower? And she says, well, we sub-rent one twice a year. I said, you just spent $7,000, I said, on something that we rent for $100 a day and we sub-rent it twice a year. That doesn't make sense. And so we had that light tower for a couple of years, and then I got a request that they needed a county fair needed more. So I went to sub-rent 4 of them and couldn't get them. So I had to buy 2 just to fill that order. And once I had 3, all of a sudden it took off. And apparently 1 wasn't enough to fill the needs of my customers. But when I had multiples, then they started renting from me instead of going to the nationals.
Interesting. So sometimes you got to make a little bit of an investment to really know, like buying one's maybe not enough to really get an indication on the market. Is that right?
Yeah. And at that time in my life, I wasn't at the counter as much anymore. So I wasn't having that conversation with the customers when they'd call up and they didn't rent. That's the one thing you got to, if somebody doesn't reserve something from you, you got to find out why. Like I say, if somebody calls you for a light tower and you say, yeah, I've got one, and they say, okay, I'll let you know. Say, do you need, before you should say, how many do you need? When do you need it? I still stress that with my guys, since we have multiple locations and we share equipment. When somebody calls up and says, do you have a Bobcat? You got to ask when they want it, because he may not want it till next week. And if you say, no, I don't have one right now, they go on to the next person. So you got to ask the questions, and that was our failure on the light towers. I say it, I learned it the hard way.
Yeah, makes sense. And what's the balance for you and gut feel? Like, you just sort of feel it. You can talk to customer and you need to make a decision on purchasing something versus using some of the metrics. You mentioned tracking missed rentals, tracking utilization. What's the balance for you?
Well, nowadays, like I say, with the computers and stuff, you can look at stuff and see your real life, So nowadays when I go to look at adding or getting rid of something, I can look and see how it's performing over the year or over the last few years. And everything goes in peaks and valleys where you'll have something that performs really poorly one year. But if you look over the last 3 years, it's performed really well for 2 of those 3 years. So don't dump it that. Wait and see if it comes back. And I look at my graphs, over the last, we've been with our software since 2005. And so I can look back over that 2005 and those graphs go up and down and up and down on a particular item. So everything cycles. So you got to look at the big picture when you're making decisions.
Interesting. And tell me about a little bit more around setting rates. It's something else we haven't really touched on here. It's one thing to have the right equipment, another thing to be priced appropriately. You don't want to be priced too high, price yourself out of the market, price too low, maybe not building a profitable business. How do you think about rate setting? How often are you doing it? What are you looking at to make some of those decisions?
I belong to Rouse Analytics, which looks at, the national scale. So I look at that. I look at the internet, what my close competitors are doing on certain items. And I've always been of the philosophy, I don't want to be the cheapest, I don't want to be the Walmart. I don't necessarily have to be hugely overpriced, but we can give, you can get great quality, great service, and great price. Those are your 3 options in any business anywhere, but you can't have all 3. So you got to decide which one you're going to be. Are you going to give out a great price and great quality but poor service, or are you going to give out great price, great service but low quality? You get to choose. And we've always been, of the belief that we're going to be great service and great quality, and we may not be the cheapest. In fact, I used to tell people that when they'd come in and tell me I was cheaper than the other guy, I'd say, well, that's an insult. I don't want you coming here because I'm the cheapest. So I'd raise my price. But when you're looking at stuff, paint sprayers, which after 30 years, we decided to get rid of them. The time it takes to service an item comes into play on what you charge for it. A paint sprayer would take one of my guys an hour to go through it after every rental just to clean it, because your customers never do a good job. And so we kept adding and adding and adding to the rental price to justify tying up an employee up, servicing it. And finally we decided it just doesn't make sense to even rent this item anymore, and we got rid of them. But you got to, when you're looking at it, what's your original cost? What time does it take to service it in between? What the market is, what the market will bear, and go from there. That's, I guess, the things that we look at. I know years and years ago, I had a friend of mine that was in the rental business call me up and told me that his floor strippers were better than my floor strippers. And I says, what brand do you rent? He says, the same as you. And I says, what do you mean yours is better? He says, well, I get 150 a day for it, and you're only charging 75. I says, really? And he says, yeah. I says, nobody complains? And he says, no. So I raised my rate and nobody complained. So I thought, boy. So you always got to be looking around. Try it if people complain too much and your sales go down, lower your price. You can always go down, but you can't come up.
That's right. You can always discount if you need to. We've got a couple questions here I want to get to, but one for me, it's how often are you updating your rates? Is that a yearly exercise? Are you doing it more frequently? How often are you doing that?
I used to do it annually, and I do it across the board. And I learned it from somebody else. I don't remember who is. You should do it individually on each item, because each item is different. It's, if you just go across 10% across the board, you may be overpricing yourself on some things and not on others. So I do it individually now. It's pretty much a constant thing. I don't do it on an annual basis now. I just constantly, I'll pick out 10 items and look at each item and how it's performing and what the competition's at, and I raise it. I very rarely lower it nowadays. It's every cost is going up, so we look at it that way, and I just keep raising it.
So I want to get some of these questions we have. You mentioned competition. Greg has asked, what do you think distinguishes you from the big rental companies? And I would also say there is a narrative, I don't know if it's true or not, that in 10, 20, 30 years, consolidation happens and there's a few major players who controls the majority of the market. I'm not saying that's happening or not, but as an independent, you're constantly fighting, right, to keep up, compete with the nationals. What's different, and how do you win against them?
We go after different customers, so I don't think the small independent's ever going to go away. My customers are small to medium contractors and do-it-yourselfers. Those, I don't deal with any big national companies. The Sunbelts and the Uniteds, they love the big nationals. They love the guys that want 35 scissors lists on a job. I can't do that. The big national companies will plan a job a year in advance and get bids on it. And, their whole way of doing business is different than Joe the plumber down the street, who he may be booked for the next 2 months, but he's not thinking about that job 2 months from now. He's the guy that calls up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a Thursday and says, "Hey, I need a scissors lift at this address tomorrow morning before 8." And we can respond to that and fill that need. Where if he calls United and says, "I need a scissors lift by 8 tomorrow morning," they laugh at him. They say, "Well, we can have it there in a week." So, like I say, that relationship that we have with the smaller to medium contractors is what feeds us, and it always will. It's not going to go away. I don't even worry about that, because I know that the bigger you get, the slower you move. And so
I guess the premise of the question, what distinguishes you from the big rental companies, it almost doesn't matter to you because you're not competing with them, is what you're saying. You're going after a different market.
Yeah, totally different clientele.
So I guess if I have my own question, what distinguishes you from the other local players you do compete with?
Well, when we started 35 years ago, there was 5 rental companies in my town. And like I say, we went at it with the great quality equipment and great service was our goal. And everybody else that was in the area had been there for 25 plus years, and their equipment was old. I always call it the old way of thinking. They'd run it till it was wore out and repaint it and put a new motor on it and rent it out again. It was still a wore out old piece of equipment. When you go to rent a car, you don't want a 73 Pontiac, you want a 2023 Mustang. If you're paying money for something, you want the newest and the best. And it's the same way in the equipment industry. You got to keep your equipment new, running like new and looking like new. Right now, I'm the only rental store in my county. We own 3 stores in 3 different cities in our county. My only competition in my county is Home Depot now. And they offer longer hours than I have. Sometimes their rates are cheaper than me. They used to not offer reservations, which was always a plus, because even a homeowner plans a Saturday, they want to know they're getting their piece of equipment. They've started taking reservations now. So I had to, to compete with Home Depot, I say I'd still have to give the good service, which they can't. The guy running the rental counter may have been in the paint department yesterday, and now he's in the rental department. So he doesn't know his equipment. So we got to keep our employees knowledgeable more than the big box, and we got to keep our equipment nicer.
Well, I mean, I think as we've talked about, my experience with Home Depot 3 years ago sort of led me down this path with Quipli. So they've gotten better, but the service piece that a local company offers, it's hard to replicate at a scale. You did mention underlying equipment quality, making sure it's new, working well. A question from Dustin is, how heavily do you factor manufacturer issues into your ROI and purchasing decisions? What's the strategy when you have a machine that gets great ROI, but it goes down for months because a necessary part is back ordered?
That's a post-COVID thing.
Yeah.
We actually just had this conversation this morning, where I'm finally getting a couple of boom lifts in that I ordered back in 2021. And normally I'd be selling a couple off as these new ones came in, and we decided that we're going to hang on to the two older ones as spares, just because we've got one machine that's been down for months. So, sadly to say, it's almost like stocking too many spare parts. I'm starting to build my rental inventory up to cover those delays. Hopefully in a couple of years it'll be straightened out. I don't see it getting straightened out real fast.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like that's a more important thing now than it was 3 or 4 years ago, back ordered parts, and how you need to think about that when you think about the fleet you're buying.
Yeah, it used to be just, you pick up the phone and you could have a part the next day, but that doesn't
Not
happen
anymore. We got another question from David here. If you buy a large piece of equipment, how long do you expect it to take to pay itself off?
And that varies. Okay. And I know I've lived by this. So like a scissors lift, you can go out there, you're paying, $12,000 for a lift, and you see what the market's bringing in for rental rates. And you say, well, it's going to take me 25 months of solid rent to recoup my money. So I go to the banker and I say, I want a 36-month note on this. That way I can positive cash flow that, even though I'm, I owe money on it, but my rental is going to pay the rent on it, plus give me money to pay for overhead costs.
Makes sense. Doug, I want to move to the next topic here we have is around equipment financing and funding and fueling rental business growth. I'm curious how you think about that. You talk about buying equipment, say you've done your research, you've gotten the calls, you want to make a decision on buying some fleet, maybe not $100 piece of equipment, but something more expensive. What's the next step here? How do I think about that? How do I finance and fund the purchasing decisions?
Most of the big stuff I buy at the rental show, and I take advantage of their specials. I can tell a story a few years back. I'd already talked to my local dealer about getting a couple new skids and a new excavator, and the show was coming up, and I told him, I said, well, I'm going to check your pricing at the show. And he says, yeah, go ahead. Well, I got down to the show and got the pricing. And the guy says, if you buy one more thing, he says, I give you $10,000 off. So I bought another little mini excavator. It cost me $11,000. I got it for $1,000. They constantly have, great financing plans at, 0% interest. Bobcat's big on that, but most of the manufacturers, especially at the show, have great financing deals. And if you get a deal with your local banker, my local banker's real good too. I worked out with him with a line of credit where, I can go buy something at the show and come back home and take care of the paperwork. So
do you essentially hold all of your big decisions until around the ARA show to take advantage of some of those deals?
Most of the time, that's the big iron. That's something that's thought out and planned. It's not really a last minute purchase. Having said that, I've had pieces go down and I need another one right now, and I've gone out and bought it. But for the most part, my planned purchases are all done at the show.
Is there a limit for you as you think about what do you pay cash and what do you finance? Like, is there certain like a framework or threshold that you use?
No, it's more of a cash flow thing.
Yeah.
If I'm sitting heavy on cash, I'll pay cash. But we spend in our company, we spend about $400,000 a year on new equipment. And so that's my budget. And so I usually spend about 300 of that at the show, and then the other 100 is during the year.
And do you find at the show that they're willing to negotiate, work with you on certain things, or is it more sticker price? This is what it is.
Oh no, at the show, you can negotiate deals.
Yeah. Well, you're an ARA board member, and a plug for the ARA show here in February in New Orleans. For those who aren't signed up yet, it'll be a good show. Any other like funding? I mean, we've talked about, equipment financing, but if I'm a smaller rental company, I want to go from one location to 2 locations, 2 to 3. What are some other funding resources I should think about?
Well, right now, I don't know if anybody on here follows Amy Kassar, but he's big with SBA funding. And right now, SBA, if you're purchasing another rental business, or if you're expanding your rental business, they've got 0 down SBA financing for that. And I can tell you, throughout Region 6, which is the upper Midwest, I can tell you about a half a dozen rental stores that are for sale right now. If people are looking to expand, I get calls. I'd say a call every month. Somebody that says, I'm almost 70 and I'm ready to retire. Do you know anybody? How do I sell my business? So they're out there if people want to expand and grow. But I definitely look at creative finance. And I say right now that with the SBA, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, I've heard several people taking advantage of that. Ami Kassar is actually going to be one of our guests in November. I think that'd be a good topic, thinking about he's the specialist, right? He's the expert in that. So that'd be a good plug for him. We do have another question around going back to the equipment side of things, around how do you project yearly revenue for a machine when trying to budget your new equipment purchases and financing? Do you just take the monthly rate times 12, or is there other sort of calculations that you'll do?
As far as projecting what it's going to do,
if you're buying a piece of equipment, what sort of model are you using to project revenue that you'll see for that equipment in the next year?
Well, so I guess I would go back to you setting your rates. And it can be tough. Right now, setting rates is really tough off of purchase price, because purchase prices have gone up 30, 50, sometimes 100% year over year. And rental rates have not followed as quickly. They're going to catch up, but if I buy a new trailer and I paid $10,000 for it, and you've got one 2 years old, you paid $5,000 for it. My rental rates and your rental rates wouldn't be the same if I always use my same calculation. So that's why, like I say, I'm constantly looking at rates to raise them. But when I look at something and say, if I paid $10,000 for that, I need it to recoup that money. And I, normally at anything over $10,000, we're looking at least 2 years ROI. Unless it's a really good item. You never know that till you get it. But set your rate. Like I say, most time, that's a nice thing now with the internet. You can look out there and you can see what Joe Blow down the next state over, if nobody has one around you, what he's getting for it. And so you start off there, and okay, you look at it and say, well, he's getting $250 a week for it. I'm gonna set my rate at $250. If I can get it out half the time, it's gonna bring in, X amount of dollars, and that's gonna give me a 2-year payback. If it goes out more than that, that's great. If it goes out less, it's a little tougher. And that's why usually, like I say, I look at the positive cash flow and say, if it's gonna take at least 2 years for me to get my money back, why don't I finance it for 3? And now I'm getting a positive cash flow up from day one. That's the way I work it.
Yeah. I want to go back to something you were talking about earlier around Rouse Analytics, which you said is a tool you use. Obviously, well known in the space, part of Ritchie Brothers now, not cheap necessarily. So I'm curious, how much value do you get in that particular tool, and how important has that been for rate setting for you?
And it's something I started a few years. It's probably been 3, maybe 4 years. I've had it now. I don't use it a huge amount, but it does help me when I'm looking at rates, especially the nationals. So you go to look at Sunbelt, and what's on their website is not what the customer's paying.
Mm-hmm.
So it really doesn't help you when you look at that. With Rouse, that goes off of what they're actually charging out the door. And it doesn't tell you, who's charging it, but they just say, okay, here's the ranges of prices on this piece of equipment over the last month. Here's the utilization of these types of, and you can look at it and you say, I'm overutilized, but I'm underpriced. Mm-hmm. So I can raise my price up on that item. And it's, everybody's got the customer that comes in and says, oh, you're too much. I can get, that same piece of equipment down the road for, $100 a day less. Well, if you picked up the phone and called the guy down the street, he ain't $100 less, but the customer's going to lie to you. And that's where Rouse, you don't have to do the phone calls. You just look at it and it tells you in real time, hey, you're cheaper than everybody else.
That's the data piece we talked about, right? There's the gut feel, but it's also validating that customers won't say the truth always, sometimes intentionally, maybe not intentionally. And getting those market comparisons for your region is important. I want to move on to one of our next topics here, which is just security and risk management. There's not always good actors. There's theft, there's fraud. You've seen a lot of that, I'm sure, over 35 years. What are some simple tactics a small, medium-sized rental company should put in place to prevent some of those things from happening?
Well, number one is always photocopy their ID. Make sure your contract is signed. Don't take checks. Get a credit card on everything. It's tougher now with credit cards, with the chip reader and stuff. And we always learned a long time ago, we don't like debit cards or prepaid cards, because crooks will use those. They'll come in and rent something for 4 hours, have a stolen prepaid card. They're out the door. You never see them again. But, get to know your customers as much as you can. If somebody's from out of town, get as much information as you can. I've been utilizing GPS as I found a company that I can buy a GPS. It's got no monthly fees on it. It lasts up to 5 years on battery life. It's small, about the size of a credit card, and I can hide it on it. I've got it on my trailers. I've got it on generators. It's small enough. I've even got it on carpet drying fans. And it lets you sleep better at night. I can pull up on my computer and see where all my equipment is. So if you got one that's not returning your phone calls and they're late, you can drive over there and grab it.
Have you ever turned someone away that, maybe, you're in Minnesota and you get a license from Florida and it sort of feels weird. Have you ever stopped the transaction? What was that process like?
It's awkward, but yeah, I've turned people down. I just say, I just don't feel good about this. And they'll yell at you and scream at you. And, I guess if I give up a $200 rental versus losing a $20,000 piece of equipment, I'm better, especially if they're from out of town. They're not your customer tomorrow anyway.
What about the process for those damages? Like, do you have photos or videos you take before and after rentals? How's that helped you?
That's helped a lot. We first started with our boom lifts, and I'm sure anybody that rents boom lifts knows this. The customers drop tree limbs on them all the time. So we started taking pictures with. I bought special cell phones that do scanning and stuff for my guys. But so with our software, they can tie it right to the contract, and they have to do full photos all the way around the equipment every time it goes out and every time it comes back. So that way, if there's an issue, we got a picture. Here's the before and here's the after. We've actually even started, and I learned this from visiting other rental stores, starting to use it for when they're hooking up trailers. Because I've had issues where my guys don't get the trailer ball coupled on right, or a customer takes it and 4 hours later the trailer came off. Well, it was because they unhooked it. Where if you got a photo of it when it went out, I personally, I think it does two things. One, it proves that you did it right if you did it right. And two, it makes that employee slow down and take a look at what they just did to make sure they have it hooked up right.
Have you had any disputes where people say, I didn't damage this, and you pull out the video or the picture? I mean, it's hard to argue with that, I imagine, but has anyone successfully argued with that?
They always argue until you show them the video.
Yeah, and you're like, well, okay.
And then they say, okay. Yeah, pictures worth 1,000 words.
That's right. That's funny. And one other thing we talked about was the National Equipment Registry. Tell me, for those who don't, maybe those who don't know what that is, what is it, and why is it important?
So the National Equipment Registry was started, decades ago, and it was actually funded through the insurance companies to get it going. But so it's a national database that works with law enforcement to locate equipment. And if you buy a car, the serial numbers on the driver's side at the lower edge of the windshield on every car. If you buy a generator, it's in a different location on every brand. Well, you can't expect your cop to know where that VIN number is. So how's he going to identify if it's stolen or not? He can pick up the phone 24/7 and call up NER, and they will tell him exactly where it's located on every piece of equipment. If it's been removed, they'll tell him where the hidden ones are, because every piece of equipment has a hidden one on it. And they'll work with them. They'll tell them if you're registered, they'll tell them who owns it. Every ARA member gets up to 1,000 pieces of equipment registered for free. I know ARA Insurance does it, and most other insurance companies I've dealt with. If your equipment is registered on the NER, they waive your deductible if it's stolen. So right there, pays you to do it. And a lot of the softwares have written programs where you can just import your stuff in. You don't have to manually type it in. So that's been, they say, I register everything on there. It's helped me with, deductibles when I've had stuff stolen. And I've had conversations with them. They also come out, they will do training if in your state or your area. If you want, you can get them to come out and do training. Back in 2006, I had them come out and do training in Minnesota here. We had probably 50 different police departments represented at that. And they do it for no charge. That's great.
Sounds like something every ARA member needs to take advantage of. First 1,000 pieces are free, no brainer. If I want to register my equipment, just go to the website. How do I get started on the process?
Yeah, just go. I'm not a geek. You go on there and just
give them a call.
Your company name and all that stuff, and just start putting your information in. And we do it quarterly now. Just pieces we've sold, we go on and take off, and pieces we bought, we add in there, and so every quarter we update it.
Last risk management topic here, you mentioned briefly, is insurance. Obviously, ARA Insurance has a great product. What do I need to think about when I'm protecting my business, my equipment? How do I think about insurance?
Insurance is a pain in the ass to shop for. Everybody hates it. But do your diligence. Like I say, I've been over the 35 years with 4 different companies. And ARA's been the easiest to apply for. But I know when I was shopping 4 different companies, each company wanted different numbers. And it was a pain in the butt. You know, it's this company wants to know what your trailers are doing. This one wants to know what your bounce houses are doing. So everybody's got their own little deal, but find a good agent. That's worth millions of dollars. So
How often should companies be thinking about, reevaluating their insurance? That every year they should be doing that? Is it less frequent than that? How often would you recommend that?
Yeah, unless you're having issues, I'd say, probably every 4 or 5 years, unless you're, if you're having issues with your company. But it's pretty competitive out there, so it's not like you're going to find somebody that is half the price. Usually with us, it was, within a few $1,000s on everybody that I dealt with. And it really boiled down to the agent more than anything else. Because when you have an issue, having that agent is on your side is priceless.
As pain in the ass to shop insurance, pain in the ass to be caught with no insurance.
Yeah, I got
I want to move to our last topic here, which was just around expanding your professional network, connecting with peers, local, state level events. COVID's changed things. We're obviously doing this webinar here virtually, but maybe tell me why that's important. As if I'm a 1-2 location rental owner, gotten new to the business the last 3 or 5 years, why is it important for me to connect with different peers? Is my first question. Secondly, okay, sounds good. How do I go ahead and do that?
Yeah, get involved with the estate organization. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to rental store guys, and they've said, I'm working 6 days a week. Why do I want to go hang out with a bunch of rental guys? You'll learn more than the time that you take away from it. Just having somebody to talk to that's in the same boat as you are, has gone through the same thing that you're going through. Getting ideas from them is priceless. Making the connections with people. I had a guy rent a trailer. I'm in southern Minnesota, and he rented a trailer to take his daughter to college up in Duluth, Minnesota, which is 3.5 hours away. And he parked it on a hill and had unhooked it, and he couldn't figure out how to latch it. And I called my friend in the rental business in Duluth and said, Jerry, can you go over and hook this trailer up? And Jerry went and did it. That would have saved me 7 hours of driving just to go take care of an issue. So yeah, like I say, the friendships you make are great. The knowledge you get. I know Jerry, my one friend, when they go on vacation, they stop at rental stores. And he says, I do my R&D. He says, rip off and duplicate. He says, I see a good idea on how to store their stuff. He says, and I take it back and do it at my store. There's no downside to getting involved. And, get your state organization going, or, participate. Most of the states have an active association. And it's, in Minnesota, we're one of the more active states. We probably have 5 or 6 get-togethers a year. Missouri has their big annual one. Iowa has 3 events every year. Sometimes they're social events, sometimes they're educational events. But like I say, just networking with other people. You can do group buys. If you get to know, all these other rental guys, we do that with stuff where they'll give you quantity discounts. So you get 3 or 4 rental stores together, and you can say, hey, let's all buy this together. We'll have it shipped to one store and we'll pick it up from there. That could save you thousands of dollars. And it's just making those connections. And whether you do it at the rental show on a national basis, or you do it at the state and local level, you can't beat it. The one thing you learn could save you tens of thousands of dollars over the years.
And I like the R&D rip off and duplicate, the idea there's nothing new under the sun, right? Like you don't need to reinvent the wheel if someone's already figured it out the hard way, right? You mentioned the national show is great for making those purchasing decisions. Local shows are more convenient. You said Minnesota 5 times a year. For building relationships and getting started, have you found the state level, local level more effective and more casual to build those relationships, or have they both been good, national and state?
On the local level, you get a lot more social interaction. As Kyle and I just talked about that, we were both at the Missouri get together, and you get to sit and talk with somebody for 20 minutes socially, and things will come up that wouldn't have come up when sitting through an hour educational meeting. I sat and had cocktails with Steve Hauser out of Missouri, and we talked about insurance because he'd just gone through a fire at his business, and so him and I talked about how that was going, how the adjusters were doing it, and I helped him out, and he gave me some good ideas for if I ever need it. So that kind of stuff, like I say, is invaluable.
Yeah, I mean, for me, national is sort of like Super Bowl. It's great, exciting. I mean, the Missouri event we were at, Steve and I, we also spent 2 hours at the Tiki Bar, and it's a more casual environment. You can trade notes, and I think both are important. I want to go back to the risk. We have another risk question from David. Do you get a COI from all of your customers?
Not from all of them, no. So we offer damage waiver as an option. So if you want to waive the damage waiver, then we require a certificate of insurance naming us as a loss payee.
So not for every customer then. Do you have some demarcation of how you think about that?
Yeah, most of the contractors that already carry rental insurance, they'll carry that. And it's one way, a contractor every once in a while will ask you for a discount. You say, well, you get 10% off if you don't do the damage waiver, and you're already paying insurance. So they'll give you the certificate of insurance, and now the contractor gets his discount. Homeowners on larger pieces of equipment, if they want to waive the damage waiver, definitely make sure that they are insured for rental equipment. Because if most homeowners insurance don't cover rental equipment, I've learned.
That's interesting. Well, Doug, it's been great having you on here today. I want to have one more question for you, and this is could be general life question to put you on the spot. Best advice you've ever received? Maybe you got a lot of advice. Pick one.
I've had a lot of advice.
That's actually the worst advice you've ever received.
Treat people the way you want to be treated. I guess is probably the best one I've ever had. I try. If you treat people like crap, they're going to treat you back like crap. If you be nice to people, they're nice to you. I can't tell you. I try to be nice to everybody, and everybody seems to be really nice to me.
Golden rule.
Yeah.
I like it. Well, Doug, we posted your email and LinkedIn and website in the chat here for anyone who wants to reach out to you directly. For our next episode, we're going to have one in 2 weeks with Elliot Vigil, sales mastermind, equipment rental industry. So he'll be great. We'll post a sign up there as well for attendees who want to join that one in 2 weeks. But Doug, it's been awesome having you on, and it was fun hanging out in Missouri. Hopefully get to see you here again soon.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me, Kyle.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks, everyone.